Jerod Jordan is an Atlanta native who came to this path from virtue in the sense that virtue derives from the Latin word vir, which means man. It's the same root word for virile. So virtue basically means manliness. Jerod is an unapologetic proponent of manliness because he's seen an assault on masculinity and realized that this is sabotaging the virtue of the people, and he's fighting back. Welcome to the New American, Jerod.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great. I was put onto you by Evan, who's one of our field coordinators, and he had very high praise for you. So what brought you to this path of realizing that there was kind of an ongoing psychological operation against the masculinity of our youth?
So, where do I start? That's a lot to unpack right there. So, where do I start? I would say it starts in the home. Of course, no fathers being in the home for over 70% of Black American children in many inner cities or whatnot, and being raised by just the female perspective, the majority of your upcoming, your formative years, I think. And so when you start to look at all the different types of issues that Black women have with Black men in these inner cities, it has carryover, especially with the sons. And when you start to look at public education, dominated by female leadership, female, just female perspective a lot of times. And I think that has a lot of carryover and kind of metastasized into an adult male where he has a lot of issues with wanting to suppress his masculinity, his masculine ways as a provider and a protector, as a protector rather. And I do think that what we see in the inner city a lot when it comes to crime, Black on Black crime, especially when it comes to the low educational levels of a lot of different inner city high schools with the graduate rates, it stems back again from the no father in the home and that female upbringing. It's a matriarchal culture in a sense.
Yeah, and I mean this is brought home. You're making these points like in the very week that Playboy is issuing a magazine with a male in the iconic female bunny suit, and his name's Bretman Rock, and he's a 23-year-old social media influencer. And I mean, this is an example of kind of changing the archetype of the African American male and trying to feminize the male. And I also saw, just as coincidence, there was another article that was just out, and it was Takreek Carroll is flipping the script on masculinity and fashion and making it okay to be weak. And so these are some of the things that are kind of being, by the power structure, kind of being like promoted out there toward, especially toward the African American community, and it's very disheartening.
Let me say this and be very clear. That is propaganda, plain and simple. I'm from Atlanta, as you know, and what I see is clear cut. Is by design. I'll start there. It's by design. And when you start to look at these different men in dresses, in drag, and just the homosexual behavior, the tendencies, Atlanta was not like this when I was growing up. It wasn't quite like this when I was growing up. And so when you see different leaders, again, in the schools, and then you see these so-called social media influencers that are just feminizing the image of Black men. What happened to the civil rights era of Black men, of Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all those different powerful type of Black American men who stood for the righteousness of our communities and whatnot? You don't have that now. And it's prevalent because your TV, your hip hop music, it's all been corrupted. It's all been done in again by the design of, from my perspective, Marxist communist ideology in this community. And let me be clear, Marxism and communism knows no color. It knows no color. So I think that also is where a lot of different people like myself have to learn that.
Well, that's one of the things we in our pre-interview we were talking about that, how the techniques that they used on African Americans are now being deployed to the white population. So the same way that they kind of wanted to tamp down on possible revolution from blacks, now they're afraid of the white populace, so they're promoting the same kind of degeneracy campaigns and stuff. And in one of my previous videos, I used a quote from Montesquieu, and Montesquieu was this guy in the early 1700s, and he was talking about how tyrants rule a population. And he said, when a society is threatened from outside, they call for the men to be manly. But when they no longer have an external threat, they start to see the people as a threat. And so Montesquieu wrote, here's the quote: Aristodemos, tyrant of Cumae, used all his endeavors to banish courage and to enervate the minds of the youth. He ordered that boys should let their hair grow in the manner of girls, that they should deck it with flowers and wear long robes of different colors to their heels, and that when they went to their masters of music and dancing, they should have women with them to carry their umbrellas, perfumes, and fans, and to present them with combs and looking glasses whenever they bathed. This education lasted till the age of 20, an education that could be agreeable to none but to a petty tyrant who exposes his sovereignty to defend his life. So basically, he was sabotaging the youth of his nation because he didn't want, people to rise up against him. So he just promoted kind of effeminacy. And in the 90s, the United States actually had a plan. You can look this up on any search engine, where they were thinking of creating a gay bomb. If there was a war with Russia, they were going to effeminize their population. So now they're using these techniques that were designed for external enemies on the internal population. So.
Right. Well, and it goes back to the point you talked about, where you want to sabotage Americanism, when you want to sabotage what this country was built on, which is virtuousness. And I think that when people start to understand, in most Black communities in these inner city, Democrat-led inner cities, you have pretty much the same design: high crime rate, low educational skill sets. The Black males are absolutely no opportunities. It's an environment of nihilism. And also you have every quarter mile in a lot of different areas in these Black inner cities, there's a liquor store, there's a fast food restaurant, and I'm going to go here. A strip club. Come on, I'm from Atlanta, not strip club capital of the world, I think. But I'm going to go here for a second too. What I've seen where the most corruption come in terms of femininity within the masculine culture of Black males is church. I've seen this, and I've always said that I don't understand how this type of behavior is allowed in church, because it goes against, from what I understand about God and my spirituality, it goes against that, because it's not designed for men to be acting in that behavior. And when you make a choice to act like that, you're choosing to go against God, in my opinion. And so for me, that's where I think it really has had, you've seen such a degradation of Black culture, because it's in the church now. And so that's why I want to take this interview with you, because I think that's where the red flags, the alarms need to go off. We need more spirituality to come back, true spirituality, true God, Christian fearing, and act almost like a sense of a revolution of traditional family values. That's what we need.
Yeah, exactly. And just getting back to like what you said about virtue, like Montesquieu, he said that republics are motivated by virtue. He said monarchies are motivated by honor, and he said despotisms are motivated by fear. So, and he also said something along those lines. So basically, my point is that the American Republic, for it to exist, it needs a population that is a virtuous population. That's the whole point of the form of government, and we've lost track of that. We totally forgot what the whole point of our form of government was, which was virtue, the promotion of virtue among the people. But he says that when a tyranny starts to come in, they promote vice. And he said this makes for very bad citizens, but it makes for very good slaves, because he wants you distracted by vice. He wants you kind of taken out of yourself, and so that you're constantly being distracted by the senses, by like the lower nature, instead of the higher nature that God would appeal to, or the higher nature, the spirituality, virtue. These are things the tyrant doesn't want, because he wants you distracted on that hamster wheel. So.
And that's exactly what's going on. And I'll say this too, that's not taught in our communities, what you just talked about. Our communities, for the most part, if you go to in most inner city Blacks schools, inner city Black families, they know nothing about what makes America a republic, or what made America a republic. They look at a lot of times in our country as democracies, as different things than what we were intended to be. And I think that's where the biggest problem is. And that's, again, what has prompted me to take this interview, because I want to make sure that I can do whatever I can. It's other men out there that feel like me. They want to do more. We want to have more input. We want to have more impact to the youth of the men, because we understand one thing. What we've seen is manifesting across America now. It's not just in our neighborhoods anymore. And I think what you just said about white culture being done in white culture now, you're absolutely right about that. But here's the kicker for that.
Correct.
When you see the war between, and I'm going to go here again, the war between liberal progressive Black women and conservative Black men, it will tear up any community. It will tear up any sense of unity within that community. Does that make sense? And it's the Kevin Samuels effect, as I call it. It's the Kevin Samuels effect. And this is rampant right now in Black culture.
Yeah, I like the Kevin Samuels. But yeah, I mean, like we were talking about that in the pre-interview about how Trump, basically the left hated him because he was unapologetically masculine, right?
Masculine, yes,
And
yes,
that's what like made him appeal to, black people or Hispanics or, or large portions of the white population. But you saw, yeah, the same disconnect of the women who just,
yes,
they're being trained to attack, kind of masculinity. They're being trained to, here, give the kids the hormone blockers, toxic masculine, and it's like,
unheard of.
if you have a population without males, you have a population without defenders. And I think
That's
that's
right.
the point. And the women are just, they're not, I don't want to make these, kind of sweeping comments, but yeah, a lot of women, especially on the left, are kind of losing sight of what will happen. What does the world look like if you have no males to defend you, So,
And these are the same women that are literally in charge, like in Atlanta, Chicago,
mm,
DC. When you look at the leadership, you have these type of women who are anti-masculine, who want people to feel like masculinity is toxic, and for that to kind of permeate into different levels of the communities with children, with other young adults, in a sense, it's it is regressive. It's like quicksand. And I've lived through Atlanta going through this. And right now,
mm,
what I see is there is a lot of men like myself who are standing up right now and who are saying we're going to have to do a better job at making sure that our boys understand how to become men. Number one. Number two, we're going to have to start pushing back against this whole narrative from other, um, I would say, homosexual men that feel like that they are empowered to speak for quote unquote the black community. No
yeah.
one speaks for me by outside of myself as a man. I don't speak for other men, but I actually have mutual self-interest with other men who understand masculinity, who understand being a protector, a provider, a conqueror. Let's be clear about that, because if you don't understand how to go out and provide and protect your family, you will get conquered every day. It's happening in
Mhm.
our communities every day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's such an excellent point, and you're starting from a foundational level too. I mean, without educating the children, without kind of rebranding and reasserting kind of
Right.
masculinity and virtue and all those things, I mean, the society falls apart. But we have a political class who's weaponized dysfunction. So and they used to do it with blacks. I mean, very cynically, and now they're doing it with the whites in terms of Antifa. And so you have the white, kind of feral kids, without fathers who are directionless and they don't know what they're doing. They're violent, they're lashing out. And those are Antifa. Then you have the black kids who are lashing out. And you have this political class who's like, instead of saying, oh, how can we fix these kids? How can we help things? How can we make things better? They're like, no, let's weaponize them. Let's send them out. Let's burn buildings. Let's affect political change. So they've weaponized, they found a way to monetize dysfunction. And it's
Yeah.
really, kind of destructive.
I call them skin traders. I think I shared my document with you earlier. I call them
Yeah.
Marxist skin traders because what they do is it really is genius what they've done in a sense. And I hate to say it that way because
Yeah.
a lot of times it's generational for black culture. When you talk about just the pure self-hatred a lot of times of being categorized only by your skin color and believing that. That means you don't believe in God. That means you don't believe in the values and your essence and worth that are God given, divine birthrights. Okay. And so you're letting people define who you are based on your color. That means they can tell you what you are. To me,
Yeah.
that's a society that's going to be doomed from the get go.
Yeah, W.E.B. Du Bois talks about that. He talks about the double consciousness of the black man in America, where you, on the one level, you're yourself, and then on the other level, you have to portray this archetype. You have to portray this caricature. But at least in the past, the archetype that you were asked to portray would have been Sidney Poitier. It would have been Denzel Washington. Now the archetype that they're asking you to portray is like a guy in a dress or a guy with bunny ears on and a fluffy tail, and it's
It's,
like,
the
you're
basketball
like,
player.
no.
Russell Westbrook really surprised me when he was pictured in a dress, modeling in a dress. Here you have one of the top 10 basketball players currently right now. And in 1990, that would have never happened. You never would have saw someone like Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, Magic Johnson, Isaiah Thomas, any of those
Well,
guys in
it
a
started with
dress.
Dennis Rodman. Remember, Dennis Rodman was
Dennis
like in that
Rodman would
wedding
tell you
dress.
he has mental issues. He's said that many
Yeah.
times. So he's a great example of what not to do. But people
Yeah,
won't say that. He said many
or
times,
yeah,
he has said many times he has a lot of issues mentally. And guess what? Believe him on that. Believe him on that. So again, when you talk about just this whole feminization of our culture, you're absolutely right. It is detrimental. It's going to end up, there has to be some type of point where we're not going to take it anymore as a society, as a true virtuous American society. And it's not based on color, it's based on character. That's going to change.
Excellent. Excellent. And with that, we're going to end the interview. And I wanted to thank Jerod Jordan for allowing the New American the opportunity to interview him. And we wish him Godspeed in his endeavors in Atlanta on behalf of America. And, thank you so much, Jerod. You rock, man. You're welcome back anytime.
God bless you.